On January the 8th, 2012, Daisy Coleman was 14 years old. Her and her 13-year-old friend snuck out of her house and they were picked up by 17-year-old Matthew Barnett. Also, Matthew had some of his friends with him. They then took these girls to a party at Matthew's house. The girls were given alcohol before Daisy was R-worded in a bedroom while a second boy recorded the assault on his cell phone. The boys then left her on her front porch where she stayed in freezing temperatures for several hours before she was found. Hello and welcome back to Crime, Mystery and Mayhem with Kate. If this is your first visit to my channel, hello, welcome. It is great to have you here. Here on my channel, I talk about true crime stories because I find them interesting and I'm quite intrigued as to why some people do what they do. There are some really bad people out there, really bad. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel because it would really help me in my attempts to grow my channel. I cannot do this without you guys. Yep. Okay, so today, this story really is so sad. I'm going to be talking about Daisy Coleman. It's so sad what happened to her. There is talk about suicide and SA in this one. So if you aren't in a good headspace, maybe click out, come back another time because the story is gonna, it might pull some triggers, you know, it's like, it's a bit full on. So with that said, let's jump into today's story. Small town veterinarian Melinda Coleman was jolted from her sleep just before 5 a.m. on January the 8th, 2012. There was a disturbance in her front yard and it woke her up. So she went down and opened the door and she looked outside. She was horrified to see her 14-year-old daughter Daisy was shoeless and wearing only a t-shirt and yoga pants, laying unconscious in the snow. So with the help of her sons, Melinda carried her ice-cold daughter into the house. It was impossible to tell how long Daisy had actually been out there in the freezing temperatures, but it had been long enough for her to be so cold and her hair had ice in it. So her mum wrapped her up in a blanket, but that failed to bring her body temperature up. So Daisy's mum had placed her in a warm bath. It was then that she noticed her daughter had bruising on her inner thighs. She immediately suspected that her daughter had been SA'd and she rushed her to the hospital. So the local sheriff's office was called and the Coleman family, they didn't know it at the time, but they were about to embark on a legal battle that would see the alleged assailant portrayed as the victim and Daisy painted as a child vixen who got what she deserved. I know. So back to the hospital. Daisy had an R-word kit performed later that morning, as were a series of laboratory tests, one of which would determine that Daisy's blood alcohol level was 134.9, which was nearly twice the legal limit. So since it was obvious that she, you know, had been out there for a while or hadn't drank for a while, the fact that she would have been legally drunk and more drunk then indicated that she would have probably been near comatose prior to ending up on her family's front lawn. Her mind was clouded by the alcohol and she wasn't in any condition to give a statement about what had happened to her. So with this in mind, it fell upon her best friend Paige, who had spent the night at the Coleman residence, to fill in the blanks. Though she appeared to be in somewhat of a daze, 13-year-old Paige had managed to tell the police that she and Daisy had been taken to a small get-together at the home of the town's star football player. So while there were several other boys on hand, they had discovered upon their arrival that they were the only girls. So it was boys and they were the only girls. As she became more lucid, Paige was able to give a detailed account of what had actually happened on this night in question, and she recalled that the sleepover at Daisy's house had kicked off with the two of them sneaking a couple of sips of liquor from the family's cabinet. Their aim wasn't necessarily to get drunk, but rather to see what the fuss was all about. Just a sip. I'm sure most of us did that. So as the night wore on, Daisy had began exchanging text messages with 17-year-old Matt Barnett, who was a close friend of her older brother Charlie. So when he invited the girls to his parents' house for a few drinks, the high school freshmen had been flattered that they were being given the chance to hang out with juniors and seniors. Thinking that they had hit the social jackpot, they jumped at the chance. So a little while later, they had snuck out through the bedroom window and they met up with Matt and his friends. They were waiting around the corner for them. They got in the car, they went with them. When they arrived at their destination, they were ushered into the basement and they were told to be quiet because his parents were asleep. This screams dodgy. So according to Paige, once the door had closed behind them, their host had immediately started plying Daisy with drinks. As she sat watching her friend down one glass of liquor after another, a 15-year-old boy had taken her by her hand and escorted her into a bedroom. After getting her alone, the boy began to force himself on Paige, who had told him repeatedly to stop. But he was ignoring her, and he pinned her down and he R-worded her as she was begging for him to let her go. This poor child. So when it was over, Paige had made a beeline back to the other room. She got out of there. While some of the boys she had seen earlier were still in the other room, Matt and her friend Daisy, they weren't. So she heard some strange noises in the next room and she glanced through the door, which was slightly open, and she saw her friend was laying half on the bed and half off, teetering on the edge of consciousness. She was mumbling incoherently and her body was limp. Tellingly, she was naked from the waist down, and so was Matt. Paige was terrified for her friend. So when they came out of the room a few minutes later, Matt was fully dressed, as was Daisy. While he appeared clear-headed and steady on his feet, she wasn't. She couldn't stand up on her own. So the activities of the night were seemingly over. The girls, they were led to the car and they were driven home. When they pulled up in front of the Coleman's house, one of the boys told Paige that she should go in and get some sleep, and that they assured her that they would stay with Daisy, who was still too groggy to walk. And they told Paige that, they'll help her. And she took them at their word. And she went inside and she slipped into bed. She's a young member. As soon as Paige was out of the picture, the boys pulled Daisy out of the car and they dumped her on her front lawn. So since the sun would be up soon, they didn't want to risk being seen with a clearly drunk minor. They just dumped her and driven off without a care in the world. So Daisy's brother Charlie, he discovered her cell phone, that it was buried in the snow later that morning, and when he checked the messages, he found the communications between his sister and the fellow jock that he had considered a friend up until then. So knowing Matt the way he did, there was no doubt in his mind that Paige was telling the truth. On the afternoon of January the 8th, Matthew Barnett was brought in for questioning. As was to be expected, his story was different. It was quite different to Paige's. The way he told it, Daisy begged to come over that night, and he had only said yes because she kept on begging. He insisted that he hadn't offered her anything to drink until after they engaged in consensual sex. And he added that although she was tipsy when she arrived at the party, she had known exactly what was happening and had been a willing participant. dude, she's 14. It doesn't matter if it's consensual or not. It's still the R word because she's 14. Wait, what's the laws over there? Because here it's 16. So the more he was talking, the more his story was changing. Initially, he was saying that he didn't know the identity of the girl who was tagging along that night. But later on, he would mention Paige by name. So when this discrepancy was pointed out to him, he just simply shrugged it off like whatever. He also walked back his claims that he had withheld alcohol from Daisy until after their sexual encounter. So having given the matter a bit more thought, he remembered, oh yeah, I did give her a couple of drinks to break the ice. So the deputy who conducted the interview, he couldn't have been more sympathetic to Matt. And at one point, he was so relaxed, this is Matt, that he was literally laying back in his chair. When the suspected R-wordist spoke of dropping Daisy off at her house at the end of the night, the officer, he was like, oh, that's so good that you got her home safe. That he hadn't, you know, he left her in the snow. He R-worded her. Oh my God. When he was questioned later the same day, one of the other boys, Jordan Zek, admitted that he had filmed Matt and Daisy having sex through a crack in the door. But he claimed that he deleted the footage soon after. But why he had felt the need to film a consensual coupling only to get rid of the evidence when the police came calling was never really addressed. Think about it. One would think that if a sexual encounter was mutual, as Matt had claimed, then preserving the video would have worked to the accused's advantage, right? But authorities hadn't seen it that way. Yeah, because they're stupid. Before the day was over, Matt Barnett would be placed under arrest for the essay of Daisy Coleman. Jordan was also booked on one charge of sexual exploitation of a minor for filming the incident. The 15-year-old who had allegedly R-worded Paige, whose name was never made public because of his age, he was a minor, was also taken into custody. When the effects of what could have been a fatal overdose of alcohol wore off, Daisy was only able to remember snippets of what had happened in the room just off the basement. Though she hadn't retained every detail, she did know that she had been plied with a staggering amount of liquor. Unaccustomed to this, she hadn't realized that she was in over her head until it was too late. This poor girl, these poor girls, there's two of them, but I'm talking about Daisy today. Yeah. So her mind was swimming in alcohol. She had no recollection of having sex, consensual or otherwise, with Matt. Her last memory was her sitting on the couch, and apparently a dog jumped up on her lap just before she passed out. And the next thing that she remembered was waking up in the hospital. While this alone should have been enough to show that she had not been in control of herself, the sheriff's office and prosecutors had seen it differently. They're blaming her. While Matt denied any wrongdoing, Paige's perpetrator, he pled guilty. He pled guilty to all the charges against him. In a surprising turn of events, he had admitted that not only had she told him no a lot, but also that it had been obvious from the get-go that she was wasted, so drunk. His plea was accepted and he was ordered to serve time in a juvenile facility. So in the hopes of establishing some semblance of normalcy, Daisy had returned to school. So she's at school and this case was still being investigated, and instead of finding support amongst her peers and her friends, she had faced hostility and bullying everywhere. Rather than questioning the story of a star athlete whose family name was above everybody, it seemed that the majority of the students had chosen to rally around him, while at the same time throwing his alleged victim to the wolves. Kids can be so horrible. This poor girl, she went through so much, and then to come to school and to be bullied so badly. So as a consequence of trusting the group of boys she thought that she knew, Daisy was branded a slut and a liar by her former friends and strangers. Her brother Charlie, who had cut ties with Matt and the others as soon as their identities were revealed, did his best to protect his sister. He tried to protect her from the slings and arrows of the ill-informed student body, but the damage it was done. As time went on, worn down by the constant harassment, the once outgoing, popular cheerleader was fast becoming a shell of her former self. And to make a bad situation worse, the man who was supposed to be an impartial upholder of the law, Sheriff Darren White, had made it known in so many words that his empathy lay with the accused. Yeah. In an interview conducted in 2016, he had lamented that the fact that the boys had been persecuted when they merely wanted to just get on with their lives. So he was mad that the boys just want to get on with their lives and the girls were making it difficult for them. I know. So when it was posed to him that perhaps the scenario he described had something to do with the fact that the boys were the ones accused of the R word and the girls were the victims, he just laughed at the notion. He said that the girls were attention seeking and that this may very well have been one of, those situations where, the girls wanted it and they were just attention seeking afterwards, crying the R word. Rather than entertaining the possibility that his assessment of the situation was a bit askew, he had put forth the idea that the girls were nothing more than attention seekers. Despite evidence to the contrary, he maintained that he wouldn't categorize what had allegedly occurred in Matt's basement as the R word. When it is. It's the R word. I wish I could say it, but I have to say the R word. It's annoying. The indisputable fact that Daisy was a child, she was 14, she had so much alcohol in her system, she couldn't walk or put a word together, a sentence, she couldn't consent to sex. It was lost on this sheriff. On another occasion, he told reporters that the alleged victims and their families had refused to cooperate with authorities, making it nearly impossible for them to conduct a thorough investigation, which was bullshit. How he had come to this conclusion, since the Colemans had been the ones that were pushing him to do his frickin' job, is yet another baffling aspect of this case. Apparently unable to quit while he was ahead, this sheriff had suggested that Melinda Coleman, the mum, enjoyed playing the part of poor victim. Yeah. This outlandish comment had been particularly vexing, considering that she had done what any parent who believed that their child had been viciously assaulted would do, namely demand that the perpetrator be brought to justice. A widowed mother whose husband had been killed in an automobile accident in 2009, Melinda had always put the well-being of her children above everything else, and no one, not even a man with a badge, was going to stand in her way. After months of being told that it was only a matter of time before a court date would be set, the Colemans received word in 2013 that the charges against Matt and Jordan, they were dismissed. Authorities pointed to an admission that Daisy had made in her initial statement to investigators as a key element in their decision. Yeah, so the case wouldn't move forward because of this statement she made. Falling headfirst into a word trap when she was asked if there was any chance that she had told the boys she would trade sexual favors in exchange for booze, Daisy said that she guessed it was possible. Knowing that the defense attorney would have a field day with that, the state had declined to move forward with the case. Though Paige had witnessed no such exchange, the damage had been done. Daisy's supporters couldn't help but wonder if the fact that Matt's grandfather, Rex Barnett, he was a former law enforcement officer and state representative, had actually influenced the decision to drop this case. So since the odds of this being truthfully addressed by the parties involved were next to nil, the public was left to decide for themselves if the alleged perpetrator's connections played a role in the charges being dismissed. It does look like it. So with all hope of facing her alleged R-worders in court now dashed, Daisy grew increasingly depressed. The subject of relentless bullying, both in person and online, she finally reached her breaking point. She was unable to cope with this ongoing harassment, and she had attempted to take her own life on 4 separate occasions. Her family had become so worried about her mental state that they removed the doors from the hinges so they could keep watch over her at all times. One night, while the family was away, their house, it was set on fire. Though no one had been harmed in this incident, they weren't about to wait around for the next time. Aware that they were no longer safe in Maryville, they moved to a neighborhood of Maryville had fallen in line behind Matt. There were a few people who believed that the system had let Daisy down. After editorials critical of the way the investigation was handled were published in print and online, the influential internet vigilante group Anonymous took up the case. They demanded justice for Daisy, and authorities finally stepped in. So the Missouri authorities stepped in. Bowing to the pressure, Maryville officials announced soon after that a new prosecutor would be reopening the investigation. So while everyone's hopes were high by this new development, it ultimately went nowhere. And after reviewing the evidence, none of the felony charges were reinstated. Instead of being held accountable for the R-word, Matthew Barnett pleaded guilty to the misdemeanor offense of second-degree child endangerment for leaving Daisy in the snow in the hours after the assault. Yeah. As a punishment, he received 4 months of a suspended sentence, meaning that he wouldn't spend a single night in prison. He was also placed on 2 years probation, during which time he had to stay away from alcohol and not allowed it. He had to perform community work. He underwent random drug testing, and he had to pay the Coleman family a sum of $1,800 in restitution. Yeah, that's it. That is it. Like, what the hell is going on? Upon graduating from high school, Daisy, a gifted artist and athlete, she was awarded a scholarship to Missouri Valley College. In 2018, with the intention of starting a new life somewhere far away from the ghosts of Maryville, she had relocated to Colorado. She found employment as a tattoo artist. Despite the post-traumatic stress disorder that served as a constant reminder of the past, she was looking forward to a brighter future. But unfortunately, fate had other plans for her. In June of 2018, tragedy struck this family once again. Melinda and her son, they were involved in a single car vehicle accident. This was her son Tristan. They were helping Daisy move house. Though Melinda had sustained some serious injuries, none of them were considered life-threatening. But sadly, 19-year-old Tristan had been killed on impact. That same year, Daisy and Charlie co-founded Safe Bay, which stands for Safe Before Anyone Else. Among other things, the proactive organization works to provide teenagers with the tools that they need to spot predatory behavior among their peers and act accordingly. It also aims to empower at-risk age groups through social and educational programs. In her role as a victims' rights advocate, Daisy began publicly sharing her story in the hopes of helping teenage girls who might find themselves in a similar situation to what she was in. Though she often did take a beating, figuratively speaking, for her outspokenness, she wanted to get the word out to anyone willing to listen that there was no shame in doing the right thing. Even as she worked tirelessly on behalf of others, the demons of the past were never far from her memory. And in the summer of 2020, these demons finally caught up with her. At around 4 o'clock on the afternoon of August the 4th, Melinda, Daisy's mum, contacted authorities in Denver, and then she asked them to perform a welfare check on her daughter. She was worried that her daughter was going to try and take her life. When they paid a visit to Daisy's apartment, they saw no signs that she was in danger. They didn't think she was going to harm herself or anyone else. But even so, just to be on the safe side, a crisis prevention agent had been sent to spend some time with her. So they were there for about an hour assessing the situation. After they determined that all was well, they left. Shortly after they left, Daisy Coleman put a gun to her head and she pulled the trigger. At 8:30 p.m, she was pronounced deceased at the age of 22. In a bizarre twist, a friend of Daisy's had come forward after her death and said that the long-suffering young woman had been the target of a stalker. Apparently, a man who was known to Daisy had been hounding her in the weeks that led up to her taking her own life. The source also added that a complaint had been lodged with local authorities, but the authorities refused to confirm or deny the allegations. So if this angle was ever followed up on, the results weren't released to the public. When he was informed of Daisy's passing, the former Maryville, Missouri Sheriff Darren White, who was running for office again after losing his bid for re-election in 2016, had initially offered his sympathies. However, as voting day approached, he had publicly posed the possibility that she had picked that time to kill herself, knowing that it would bring her case back to the forefront. This quashing his chances of winning. Yeah, having revealed his true nature to everyone, again, his opponent won by a landslide. He's a piece of shit. 4 months later, 58-year-old Melinda Coleman posted several remembrances of her daughter on social media before she picked up a pistol and ended her own life. Her son Logan, great name, that's my son's name, who was in the house at the time, he found his mum's body. Before her death, she had been vocal in her belief that Daisy had never gotten over the essay and the public scrutiny that she and her loved ones had been subjected to as a result. Matthew Barnett, who had pursued higher education at his grandfather's alma mater, Northwest Missouri State University, after his period of probation ended, had also expressed his sadness at the tragic turn of events. What a piece of shit you are, Matt. A success in his field, he had, by all accounts, done quite well for himself. With a steady girlfriend by his side and the world at his feet, he appeared to be living the dream. His having won life's lottery must have come as a relief to former Sheriff White, who had worried that Daisy's dodged attempts to bring her alleged R-worders to justice would hinder his future success. Hopefully he can rest easy, knowing that Matt is doing just fine, even though the same couldn't be said for his alleged victim. Safe Bay, Daisy's dream child, is still going strong, thanks to her brother Charlie. Charlie has lost so much. Determined to see to it that no other victims of teenage SA are forced to face the scrutiny that crushed his sister's spirit, he has become a champion of those everywhere who want more than anything else to be heard. At first glance, Daisy Coleman appeared to have it all. She was beautiful, she was talented, she was intelligent, and a desire to help others. Underneath her strong exterior, however, lived a battered soul who had experienced too much too soon. Unfortunately, having seen the dark side of humanity, she was never able to find her way back into the light. That is so sad. No, I'm probably going to cry. No, I'm not going to cry. Don't cry, Kate. I'm talking to myself. Okay, I'm alright. I'm going to leave it there. I hope you guys have a wonderful morning, day, night, whatever it is where you are. I'll talk to you later. I gotta go. Have a great day, guys. Bye.